So hello everyone again, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anne Kane, and I work as part of the marketing team here at IIBA. IIBA is an independent, not-for-profit professional association serving the global business analysis community. A recognized thought leader, IIBA is dedicated to elevating the discipline of business analysis. We provide our global community with relevant tools, resources, and networking opportunities to take control of your career. We are very excited to welcome you today to Best Practices with Analytics with Newcomp Analytics. Before we get started, I have just a little bit of housekeeping to cover. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A section in your webinar controls at the bottom of your Zoom window. You can continue typing comments into the chat. Today's webinar recording will be available on our IIBA webinar archives page within 10 business days of broadcast. I'm excited to introduce our moderator today, Alexandra Lazinski. She's the marketing director at Newcomp Analytics and has spent the last 6 years working in the analytics field. Newcomp's focus is on making analytics accessible to everyone, and today's webinar is just one of their many initiatives to help educate and drive awareness on how to be successful with analytics.
Okay, amazing, great. Thank you for that intro, Anne, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. As Anne mentioned, I will be your moderator for today, so if you have any questions, just drop them into that Q&A section, and we'll do our best to get them answered throughout the session. And you'll also get a copy of the slides in PDF, and as she mentioned, the recording will be available as well. So our presenter today is Brian Simpson. He is the VP of Analytics and Performance Management here at Newcomp. He has spent the last 15 plus years helping organizations get started with analytics. So he's definitely put some content, a great content for you, and I'm excited to pass it over to Brian and he'll take it away.
Thank you very much, Alex. Just confirming you can hear me and you can see my screen. All good? Awesome. Okay, so I appreciate the introduction. I'll elaborate a little bit on who I am and what I do here at Newcomp. So I'm a Vice President of Analytics and Performance Management at Newcomp Analytics. I've been doing analytics for about 15 years now. I've been at Newcomp for 9 of those years, and I spent 7 years at IBM prior to joining Newcomp. I've got sort of a broad skill set across the analytics domains. My particular focus is on financial planning and performance management. That's why it's in my title. But you can see I've got a whole bunch of skills listed there as well. Outside of work, I always like to say a few things about myself outside of work. I live in a small town called Uxbridge, Ontario, just outside of Toronto in Canada. Great, by the way, to see so many people from around the world on this webinar. That's really cool to see. I like craft beer, I like rock music, I like gaming, and I like everybody, I like traveling. So that's a few things about myself. A little bit about who Newcomp Analytics is. So we are a world-class analytics firm that provides professional consulting and development services, technology advisory services, support, and training to our customers. We're based here in Toronto, Canada. We serve customers throughout North America and also in the Caribbean. Our core, we are analytics specialists. So we cultivate relationships with industry-leading vendors of analytics solutions, including vendors such as IBM, Microsoft, Alteryx, Tableau, and others. You can see a few others on the slide. And we're constantly looking at market trends and new technologies to ensure we're bringing the best analytics solutions to our customers. We've also got a talented team of analytics professionals who can help you with any and all of your data and analytics projects. A little bit about what we do specifically. We cover 5 domains within the data and analytics space. First up is AI and machine learning. As this technology becomes more and more accessible and more prevalent, we're seeing organizations across all industries looking to incorporate AI and machine learning into their data and analytics strategies. This is an exciting area of innovation with some really cool projects, everything from predictive forecasts to AI chatbots. Next up on the slide is data engineering. Analytics always involves data. Organizations have more data sources producing more data than ever before. You've probably heard that before. We help with structuring that data and moving it around, and also securing it and governing that data. We're going to talk a lot about data governance throughout the presentation. Data engineering is really the foundation of any successful analytics program. We'll talk more about that as well in this presentation. Next, BI and data visualization. This is a domain that many people are already familiar with. This is all about delivering data to the right people at the right time in an easily consumable fashion. There's some really great tools out there that can help bring your data to life. Financial planning and analytics, this is the domain that I specialize in. Here we build models and processes to help organizations with financial and operational planning and forecasting. May not be as exciting as some of the other areas like AI and machine learning, but it's usually mission critical to any organization that we work with. And finally, no analytics practice would be complete without expertise in cloud. More and more organizations are shifting workflows and applications to the cloud, especially in the past few years. So we've got expertise to help with that transition. Okay, so enough about Newcomp. Let's start off the presentation by a simple definition. Let's define what data analysis means. So data analysis is the process of inspecting, cleansing, transforming, and modeling data with the goal of discovering useful information, informing conclusions, and supporting decision-making. I want to be clear here that our definition specifically states the goal of the analysis, and it's obviously very business-centric. We'll talk more about identifying those goals, but the important point here is that there is a goal, a business-oriented goal. So it's more than just looking at data because it's there. And why do businesses even want to look at data? I've included an appropriate quote on this slide from Arthur C. Nielsen. You might recognize the name Nielsen. Arthur Nielsen was a market research analyst who created and tracked the Nielsen ratings for radio and television. The Nielsen ratings were used to track audience size and competition of radio and television programming with the goal of informing producers of those programs with data indicating how successful a program was. So the quote says, "The price of light is less than the cost of darkness." It's very clever wording. To put it another way, sort of in context of this presentation, the price of doing analytics to get insight from your data is less than the cost of being in the dark and not knowing what that data might reveal. So I thought that was pretty appropriate. There's a number of good reasons to do data analytics within an organization or even at the personal level. Analytics projects should always have that goal in mind. They could support decision-making by using data analysis to tell a story to key decision makers, or maybe support business strategies with scientific, factual data presented clearly and concisely, as opposed to gut feel or incomplete information. Data analytics can help businesses operate more efficiently by identifying opportunities for improvement or areas of inefficiency. Analytics can help you attract and retain customers, or improve product quality, or identify areas for business expansion. The list of business goals is essentially endless. The main point that we want to support those goals with data and facts. What we don't want is to do analytics just for the sake of doing analytics with no real goal in mind, or use flashy charts and dashboards to wow people without actually getting the right message across. I love this Dilbert cartoon that demonstrates just that. There's a lot of shiny new tools and technologies out there encouraging you to try them out and jump on the analytics bandwagon. There's a lot of hype out there about data analytics, data science, AI, machine learning, etc. But the key to success, true success with analytics, involves doing things the right way. And it starts with identifying a goal and sticking to some core principles that will help you along the way. Most of these core principles are pretty obvious, but they're worth repeating over and over again. We already talked about the importance of a business goal, and it's important to keep that goal in mind throughout the project. It may even take a while to identify and establish the right goals for your organization, but that's okay. That means you're off to a good start. I'll talk more in a bit about some ideas for analytics goals. Next up is good data. You've all heard the phrase, garbage in, garbage out. Our analytics outcomes won't be very useful if we start with bad data. So using good trusted data is critical, even if it means you need to spend a bit of time getting to the point where your data is good. It's also important to understand your data. Be skeptical if things look wrong. It's actually quite easy to produce bad analyses with good data. It's really easy to misinterpret data, or worse, let bias influence data. There's one, this one is super important, since by the nature of our data analytics role, we're often presenting data as fact. we have to be really careful how we do that. There's something called the Simpsons Paradox, and it's not named after me. My name's Brian Simpson, it's not named after me. But the Simpsons Paradox, which also goes by several other names, it's a phenomenon in probability and statistics in which a trend appears in several groups of data, but disappears or reverses when the groups are combined. And I'm going to give you an example of this because I really want to reinforce this point about how data can be misleading. So the Simpsons Paradox, one of the best known examples of the Simpsons Paradox is a study of gender bias among graduate school admissions to the University of California, Berkeley. The admission figures for the fall of 1973, they showed that men applying were more likely than women to be admitted. And the difference was so large that it was unlikely to be due to chance. So you can see here on the table, 44% of men are admitted and only 35% of women are showing as admitted. Now, when examining the individual departments, it appeared that 6 out of 85 departments were significantly biased against men, whereas only 4 were significantly biased against women. When taking into account the information about departments being applied to, the different rejection percentages reveal the different difficulty of getting into those departments. And at the same time, it showed that women tended to apply to more competitive departments with lower rates of admission, even among qualified applicants, such as the English department, whereas men, they were applying to less competitive departments with higher rates of admission, such as engineering. So in fact, the pooled and corrected data showed a small but statistically significant bias in favor of women. The data from the 6 largest departments is listed here on the slide, so you can see the disparity there. An even simpler example of the Simpsons Paradox, if you're a baseball fan like me, this one's about batting averages of players in professional baseball. So it's possible for one player to have a higher batting average than another player for each year for a number of years, but to have a lower batting average across all of those years. This phenomenon can occur when there's a large difference in the number of at-bats between the years. A mathematician named Ken Ross demonstrated this with this particular example using 2 well-known baseball players, Derek Jeter and David Justice, during the 95 and 96 seasons. So in both 95 and 96, David Justice had a higher batting average, it's shown there in bold type, than Jeter did. However, when the 2 seasons are combined, Jeter shows a higher batting average than Justice. These examples demonstrate how data can easily mislead, whether by accident or worse, through intentional misrepresentation of the facts. Okay, so returning to our core principles. I just presented a few examples that hopefully were understandable and relevant to the discussion. It's obviously important that your customers, and I use that term to refer really to anyone who consumes the results of your data analysis. It's important that your customers understand the story you're trying to tell and actually care to listen. This sort of relates back to our Dilbert pie cartoon. We want our output to be meaningful and have purpose. We're not doing analytics just for the sake of doing analytics or to impress anyone with flashy charts and beautiful dashboards or pie charts. My next core principle, it's about sharing and communicating. I'll talk later towards the end of the presentation about building a culture of analytics, which really emphasizes the sharing and communicating core principle. But sharing and communicating includes not just the output of your analytics projects, but also sharing best practices, new ideas, training materials, opportunities for everyone in your organization to be involved with analytics. And when we say communicate, we mean communicate with the business, with your customers, your stakeholders, understand what they really want, how they'll use it, when they'll need it. These are all important for successful data analytics. And the last core principle on this slide, adapt and evolve. The truth is that data and analytics technology is itself evolving at a really fast pace. As an organization, you don't necessarily have to stay on the leading edge of technology innovation, but it's also important that you don't fall too far behind either, or you may miss out on significant opportunities. Remember Nielsen's quote, price of light is less than the cost of darkness. Now, it's really easy for me to say all these things about core principles and talk like it's easy to implement a data and analytics program or project. But the truth is there are major obstacles that may inhibit the adoption of data and analytics and best practices within an organization. Some of the most common obstacles we see are listed here on the slide. Data problems, one of the most common problems that might prevent the adoption of data analytics. Many organizations struggle to sort out data problems before they can even begin to think about doing analytics on that data. And that's perfectly normal. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. So making sure your data is clean and ready for analytics is important. We do a lot of analytics projects here at Newcomp, and most organizations we work with have messy data. So don't feel like you're an outlier if that's the situation where you work. It's pretty common. Likewise, disconnected data is a problem that's becoming more and more common. It basically means having data in a bunch of disparate systems. This often happens when organizations grow over time or acquire new companies that come in with different systems. Sometimes it happens because they simply implement solutions really quickly for one group or one unit without centralizing or standardizing those systems. They're just trying to solve a problem and get it done quickly. This can lead to a variety of different technologies, different data structures, different data standards throughout the organization. And then it becomes really difficult to pull all that data back and merge it together again. I'll talk in a little bit about how we can use a data warehouse or a data lake as a good solution to this problem. Next on the slide, lack or inefficient use of technology and lack of standards and best practices around that technology. For organizations with mature data analytics programs, Newcomp advocates for and we help implement an analytics center of excellence whose purpose is to establish, maintain, and communicate standards and best practices across an organization. And not just standards and best practices, but technology as well, to ensure that common technology is being used across the entire organization and following all those best practices. It takes a while to get to that point, though. You need to start small, make sure you have all the right tools and people and processes in place, and then grow from there. And we'll talk throughout the presentation about how we get started. Part of that growth involves training and support. I've seen organizations implement really great tools, really great solutions, only to struggle with supporting them across the organization, which can then result in not getting great value from your investment. It's important that organizations own the tools, and to do that, you need proper training and support. You need to internalize the skills so that you're in a good place to maintain and enhance them going forward without relying on expensive consultants or vendor support. And finally, another common obstacle is misalignment between IT projects and business needs. So many organizations have a rift between IT and the business. So many times I've seen data and analytics projects that are IT-led and completely miss the mark in terms of what the business really wants. This is sort of related to what we talked about earlier. We don't want to do analytics just for the sake of doing analytics. There has to be a business goal. Now, of course, these are just a few of the obstacles that might get in the way. I put together a slide with more. There's actually tons of different reasons why it may be difficult for an organization to do analytics. It can be anything from work process issues, data issues, organizational or cultural issues, even technology issues. I'm not going to read this whole slide, but I'm sure you'll pick out some of the obstacles here that are familiar to you and impact your own organizations. The truth is, pretty much every organization out there, whether big or small, has obstacles that will get in the way of doing good data analytics. You're not alone if you have messy data, like I said, or siloed data, or lack of training and expertise in analytics, or processes that are difficult to change, or people who are resistant to change. We see these obstacles in pretty much every organization we work with. It's how they overcome these obstacles that really separates the successes from the failures. So we're going to talk about some techniques to overcome these obstacles in a bit. But first, let's talk a little bit about how to even get started. So the first step is to carefully examine your analytical needs from data sources to data users. How people use the data. What data do they need? Why do they use it? How quickly do they need it? When do they need it? Understanding all of this will lay the foundation for an analytics strategy that supports a data-driven company. And it'll help you identify and establish those business goals that we're emphasizing. We talked about how data quality can be a big obstacle. So early and sustained attention to data quality and data governance is really important. This needs to become an ongoing effort to ensure continued success. And speaking of ongoing efforts, it's also important to review processes and metrics and goals themselves regularly. Things change and businesses evolve. So you should be constantly questioning and revalidating why you're doing certain things, why you're looking at certain metrics. The classic example I give is an organization who's been producing a specific report a specific report for the past 10 years. You know, Susie does this report every Monday morning. It takes her 4 hours and then she sends it out by email. Just because you've been producing that report for 10 years doesn't necessarily mean it's useful. Ask if anyone's actually using it. Are they getting value out of it? Are there things that they would like to see changed on that report? Does the value that they're getting justify the time and cost of producing it? Is there something better that could be done? And then on top of all this, we want to keep an eye on the business goal, analyzing data to achieve useful, actionable information. Your analytics program should empower non-technical users with information delivery, reporting, and visualization capabilities that they can employ on a self-service basis. Okay, I talked about something called data governance on the previous slide. I want to take a quick moment to define this term because it's really important. Data governance is a quality control discipline for assessing, managing, using, improving, monitoring, maintaining, and protecting organizational information. Data governance is quickly becoming a critical consideration for businesses around the globe with the introduction of new regulations like GDPR. You might have heard of GDPR. It stands for General Data Protection Regulation. It's a regulation in European law on data protection and data privacy. GDPR concerns the rights of the data subject, the duties of data controllers or processors, how data is transferred, personal data is transferred to third parties, the supervisory authorities, cooperation among member states, remedies, liabilities, penalties for breach of rights, and more. There's similar regulations coming into place really around the world. There's some in North America as well, including the California Consumer Protection Act, CCPA, and the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA. Companies operating in jurisdictions or collecting data on people that live in jurisdictions covered by regulations must adhere to strict governance policies around data or face hefty fines. Now, data governance isn't just about protecting private or sensitive data. In the context of an analytics project, data governance concerns how we ensure as an organization that our data is clean, accessible, trusted, and secured. Recall earlier we talked about garbage in, garbage out. Data governance helps us ensure we're not working with garbage data. Organizations that struggle with this problem are prime candidates for implementing a data governance program. It can be as simple as making sure the correct account codes are used or making sure every customer has an address associated with their file. Data governance really should be an enterprise-wide ongoing effort, but it doesn't need to start as a big program. It can be very daunting and expensive. Implementing it for a good reason to ensure we have trust and we protect our data is important, but you don't have to start with an enterprise-wide program. We talked about how the obstacle that is messy data, it's kind of like painting the proverbial bridge. Cleaning and maintaining and securing enterprise data is a task that really never ends. And while not strictly related to analytics, the concept of data governance is absolutely related to data. And so I wanted to raise this as the topic that every organization should be thinking about. In terms of getting started, the key is identifying where the problem exists and treating it as a business issue. More specifically, the key involves identifying how the problem is impacting your current program or project and treating that as a business issue. So we're not necessarily trying to clean up all the data, but certainly the data we're trying to use at this moment. It's really important to treat it as a business issue. Data governance is not solely an IT problem. I see a lot of organizations who believe this is an IT issue. It's not solely an IT problem. Depending on the nature of the issue, IT may not even be involved at all. Now, data governance can indeed be a big program in and of itself. The intricacies of that program and best practices around it, we'll have to leave to another presentation because that could be a whole presentation in and of itself. Okay, so let's get back on track. We were talking about where to start, but sometimes the where is pretty obvious. It's the how that can be the big challenge. So starting small is key here. We don't want to try and boil the ocean. You don't need an extensive data warehouse to reap the benefits of data analytics within your organization, though it certainly helps. While you should plan future ways to use analyses and ways to expand into different areas of your business, you can achieve considerable success on the departmental or functional level. An incremental strategy that builds on small successes lets you start with, the types of reports, analyses, or planning functions that you need first, essentially your highest priority items. In finance, for example, analytics might be used to address cash flow visibility and avoid shortfalls. Operationally, you might want to get reports to your department leads quicker. For your workforce, analytics might help address salary planning or project management or resource planning. In customer relations, it can help address profitability, making marketing effectiveness and customer churn a priority. There are lots of areas of the business that could probably use attention and use some analytics. Identifying a small project to start and building on that success will quickly become a case of prioritization as more and more groups want to get involved. I put together a list of some pilot project examples. These are all real world examples that we've implemented across our customer base. For example, enhancing a budgeting and forecasting process. We often see budgeting and forecasting and planning being done in Excel. It quickly becomes very error prone, very manual, very cumbersome. Enhancing this process with a proper technology that's built for budgeting and planning can be a analytics project, a pilot project. Implementing automated management reporting. I talked about Susie producing that report and taking 4 hours to produce it every morning. Maybe that's something that can be automated. Certainly if we have the data in a system and we have a tool to automate reporting, then maybe we can set that up to be emailed out instead of having Susie build it manually every morning. Building a KPI dashboard. Dashboarding may be something that your organization hasn't really delved into, but the executive team might get a lot of value out of seeing up to the minute key performance indicators and metrics for the organization on a dashboard that they can look at and slice and dice and drill down on every morning. That might get you huge bang for your buck. One of my favorite ones on this slide, replacing a legacy system. We see this so often. Organizations have a legacy system that's out of support or difficult to maintain, or homegrown, and the person who built it has long since retired. And that legacy system represents a single point of failure within the organization. And if it goes down, they lose all the ability to see their own data or to do any analysis. So replacing a single point of failure might be a good pilot program. Implementing a data mart. This is probably the most common one on this slide. We have a lot of organizations that have that messy data, the disparate systems. They want to do analysis, but they want to start by cleaning up their data. It's not necessarily a full-blown enterprise-wide data warehouse that takes 2 or 3 years to build. It could just be a purpose-built analytics data mart, just the data we need to do reporting and analysis. I included establish a data governance policy on here. I think it's important to include that. So that could be a pilot program to get you started on analytics and data. And then lastly, a predictive forecast or any type of sort of data science project, a little bit more advanced, but might give you a huge insight into your business. I'm sure all of you on this call, there's quite a few people on, can think of data analytics projects that would benefit your teams, your departments, your organizations. Let's talk a little bit about running a project. Now that we've figured out how to identify a good candidate for a data analytics pilot project, let's talk about how we can ensure that project is successful right from the start. These are a few tips that have worked really well for the team here at Newcomp. You can probably come up with more. And I included another Dilbert cartoon. You can tell I love Dilbert, so this one's funny and very relevant as well. I'm going to start with keep the big picture in mind. We don't want to lose sight of our goal, our business goal, remember. It's especially easy with shiny new data analytics tools to go down a rabbit hole. We obviously want to avoid that. It's even easier to over-engineer solutions and to end up trying to do too much. So we want to, manage it and keep that big picture in mind. In order to keep things on track, we'll establish a roadmap. And the roadmap should include milestones and priorities, dates. It's a way to hold ourselves accountable. It'll also let us work in smaller sprints and hopefully have something demo or prototype early and often. We want to show off our early success. We want to build momentum. And we want to get regular feedback from our stakeholders and our customers. To that end, we should involve those customers and stakeholders early and often as well. We don't necessarily want to let them dictate scope or timelines of the project, as is hilariously illustrated in this comic. But the customers can help keep us on track and steering towards that business goal. My last tip here, don't underestimate the testing effort. I throw this one in, it seems a little out of place because I see this happen all the time. Chances are the data isn't perfect, the user requirements aren't perfect, what the users are asking for is potentially going to change. We may need several iterations before we get things right. Some types of analytics projects will essentially be ongoing efforts in refinement and innovation. So in a sense, they're constantly changing and evolving and never end. But don't underestimate the testing effort, and definitely involve your users in that as well. I used to call these Brian's laws for successful implementation, but now we simply refer to them as guiding principles. These are all pretty straightforward, but these are, again, ways that you can ensure success of your analytics project. First and foremost, keep it simple, sometimes known as the KISS principle. I'm a big fan of keeping it simple, especially when it comes to analytics projects. Obviously, it's easy for me to say this here, and the truth is, you guys know this, data analytics projects are rarely simple. So maybe we should amend this one to say, keep it as simple as possible. Don't overcomplicate things. It's really, really easy, as I said, to over-engineer a solution to a technical problem. I've seen it happen plenty of times. We like to start with simple solutions. We can always expand on them later. Next principle, use the right tool for the job. Don't use Excel as a database. It's not what it's for. There's tons of tools out there for every possible aspect of data and analytics projects. In most cases, there are multiple tools from different vendors giving you a wide variety to select from. If you're not sure what the right tool is, ask an expert who does know. Bear in mind, the right tool is not necessarily the tool that most closely meets your requirements. It may be the right tool is the tool that the users and the customers are comfortable with, or the tool that you already own that is good enough, or the tool that meets the most of your requirements and is affordable for the organization. Next up, manage scope. This one will be near and dear to the hearts of any project managers out there. You may have heard the term scope creep before, where scope of the requirements creeps up or expands. This can be disastrous for an analytics project, especially a project that you're trying to keep simple or keep small. Remember, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. Start small, keep it simple, manage the scope tightly. I often get asked on this one, well, how do you do that? So if I go back to that Dilbert cartoon with the user stories, like how do you tell the users no? Remember that this is meant to be a pilot project. Even if it's not your pilot project and it's, second or third phase of a project, there's always time to do more later. You can always add to it. You don't necessarily have to accommodate and incorporate every possible feature and every possible request. The idea is to show value quickly and build on that momentum, as opposed to trying to take on too much and failing. So usually when we were trying to manage scope and discussing that with the users, we compromise and we find ways to defer if required and help them understand that if we take on too much now, the whole thing might fail. Next up, and we've covered this one a few times already, but I want to keep sort of hammering it home, keep an eye on the business goals. Don't lose sight of them when you're in the thick of it. It's really easy to do that and go down that rabbit hole. And lastly, own the solution. So what do I mean by this? The organizations that I've worked with who are the most successful with their data and analytics projects are those that take ownership of the solutions. They may use external consulting like Newcomp to help them get started, but then they internalize those skills. They run with it on their own. They have internal power users or champions or supporters or stakeholders. Maybe they even build that center of excellence and truly make analytics a part of the culture. That's what I mean by own the solution. Okay, so speaking of using the right tool for the job, I want to take a sidetrack quickly here and talk a little bit about building the foundation, your data strategy. I gave an example on the previous slide of not using Excel as a database. And we've also talked already about garbage in, garbage out as a concept as it relates to data. A data strategy is integral to the success of data and analytics projects within any organization. It's how we build for long-term success. It's the foundation upon which our analytics strategy will rest. This slide has some bullet points covering how a data strategy aligns with analytics. It's by no means exclusive. It's not a full list. Perhaps some of the more important considerations are listed here. There's a few I want to call out. First, the data staging and warehousing. We're going to cover that on the next slide. So I want to focus a little bit more on that one. It may seem basic and totally old school, but the truth is that many organizations still struggle with pulling all their data into one place, cleaning it up, and applying some data governance to it. It doesn't really matter if it's a traditional data warehouse, a data lake, on premises, on the cloud. The point is to provide that central location, that single source of the truth. Having the foundation in place makes it much easier to build analytics on top of it. I've seen organizations try to do analytics without this foundation in place. As you can expect, it gets pretty messy. It becomes really hard to trust the output. It also becomes really hard to add to later. And if you were to swap out a source system, things can get really complicated. It doesn't have to be that full-blown organization-wide data warehouse. It can be as simple as a data staging area. I actually really like the term data mart instead of warehouse, whose sole purpose is to serve up data for analytics applications. There's a few other points on this slide that are worth calling out or that we've already looked at, things like change management, data confidence, the security policies and data governance, transparency, integrity, auditability. These are all important points for your data strategy. Let's take a quick look at what a data warehouse even is so we can drill down on that one a bit. In analytics, the purpose of a data warehouse is to stage and optimize data retrieval to facilitate analytics and reporting. Data can be organized into common design patterns and may include unstructured data, as well as, depending on the type of analysis you're doing, you may include all kinds of data types. The design of a data warehouse often starts from an analysis of what data already exists, how it's collected, and how the data is going to be used later. The data is often integrated and transformed before it's loaded into a warehouse. This gives us an opportunity to clean things up, to merge data sets from those disparate data sources together. There's some new technologies out there that will let you leave the data where it currently lives and instead use something called data virtualization to basically simulate a data warehouse. If you haven't heard the term before, data virtualization is an approach to data management that allows an application to retrieve and manipulate data without requiring the technical details about the data, such as how it's formatted at the source, where it's physically located. And that data virtualization can then give you a single view, a single customer view, or a single view of any entity on the overall data. The point here is, and I don't want to say that the choice of technology isn't important. It absolutely is. But remember, use the right tool for the job. Regardless of what technology you select to fill this need, the benefits of using a data warehouse should hopefully be apparent. Remember, a data warehouse or a data mart or a data lake or whatever you want to call it is the foundation of our data and analytics program. It lets us standardize and merge that data together. We can apply security and governance best practices. It gives us an opportunity to clean up, shape, and transform the data for reporting and analytics. It can be technology and vendor agnostic, meaning you can use multiple analytics tools on top of it and swap them out with relative ease. I'm going to expand a little bit on what I mean by this concept. If you implement a data mart and then apply a number of different analytics technologies on top of it, it could be a data visualization tool, a budgeting and planning tool, a reporting tool, a data science tool, could even be open source or off the shelf, it doesn't really matter. By making the system agnostic, ideally all of those tools can connect to it. They're all working off a single source of the truth. So they're all working off that single data store. On top of that, that data warehouse is being fed from all of your different source systems. If you swap out a source system, you don't necessarily need to change anything that the applications are doing because they're connecting to the database and not to the source system behind it. So making it sort of agnostic in that sense gives you a lot of flexibility when you have an evolving business. It's also scalable and expandable, built for performance. The idea is to make data available to your organization, ideally in a technology where there are skills already available. The list, of course, of benefits goes on. The obvious drawbacks to me recommending a data warehouse or a data mart: time and money. It takes time to implement. It takes money to implement. It requires investment. It requires ongoing maintenance and support. But we're all about doing things the right way the first time around, instead of taking shortcuts and then having to go back and rework things later. The truth is we're still implementing data warehouses at many of our customers because they've come around and finally seen the value of having all their data in one place. I wanted to show what a simplified data architecture might look like. The data warehouse forms that foundational layer of our data and analytics architecture. This diagram, by the way, is definitely oversimplified. So if there's any tech folks on the call, I definitely recognize this is an oversimplified diagram of a typical architecture. However, I wanted to keep it simple for the purposes of this presentation. On the left-hand side, we have our source systems. They might be your ERP, CRM, HRIS system. They might be on-prem or on the cloud. Maybe you've got some Excel workbooks, CSV files, API streams. All of those are perfectly valid source systems. They're all there on the left. We want to bring them into our data warehouse as needed. And I'm going to say that again, as needed. We don't necessarily need to bring everything in. If you try and do that, it'll become too big a project. We don't want every piece of data ever. We're going to clean them up. We're going to apply all those best practices and benefits that we just looked at, and we're only going to bring in what we need for our applications. To the right of our data warehouse are our data analysis applications. They might be any type of planning, reporting, analysis, or data science type applications. This, of course, is where the real magic happens. There's tons of applications out there to help you achieve your business goals and do wonderful things with your data. The output of those applications are the reports, the dashboards, the analyses, et cetera, that are then consumed by our customers, be they internal or external. And those customers could be your various departments, your executive team, your internal users, your external customers. They could be regulatory bodies or the public on the internet. So those customers could really be anyone. Now, I say all this about a data warehouse, but of course, another Dilbert cartoon, don't let a data warehouse derail your analytics agenda. I've seen this happen. Trying to attain perfect data before starting with your analytics projects may result in never actually starting with those analytics projects. You have to balance these priorities, and remember, keep it simple and focused on the business goals. Data and analytics programs within an organization should be an ongoing thing, a journey instead of a destination. Speaking of the analytics journey, I wanted to lay out what a typical journey might look like for an organization getting started with data and analytics. We talked earlier about a pilot project and gave some examples on how to get things started. It says on this slide a quick win. I'm not a big fan of the term quick win, but ideally we choose a pilot project that will demonstrate the value of investing in data analytics so that we can build momentum and continue doing good things with analytics within any organization. I've worked with a few companies who were really skeptical at first. They weren't sure if the investment was worth their time and money. They were going down a road that they had never really been down with analytics. There were, a lot of folks who were resistant to the idea of analyzing the data and who were used to running the business on sort of that gut feel or saying, hey, I've got 30 years experience, like this is how we've always done things. So I've worked with a few companies who were pretty skeptical. But once they got going, what they realized was they simply couldn't keep up with the demand from across the organization. People would see the value of their efforts and say, hey, this is great. How do I get my data in there? How do I get my department involved? I want to be next on your project list. Make sure I get involved. And so once you've got that demand and the stakeholders take notice and see the value of the investment, you really get the opportunity to expand the footprint, increase value, continue with more projects. And as you gain maturity, you'll be able to work with more advanced tools on more advanced analytics projects. Eventually, you may get to the point where you've established what we call a culture of analytics, which really means having everyone on board, everyone using analytics and data as part of their day-to-day job. We call this whole journey, we call it a journey along the analytics maturity curve. The analytics maturity curve, this slide shows a complete view of this analytics journey and the analytics maturity curve. It starts on the left with the basics, and then it progresses to the right as the organization's analytics maturity level increases. Now, obviously, this is an oversimplification as well, and is not directly applicable to what every organization may look like. Some may find they're mature in some aspects of their data and analytics and less mature in others. Some may find that they're really good at doing advanced analytics and data science, but their data is still a mess. But at least this slide gives you some ideas of the different stages of the journey and what they might look like. So on the left, we have things like basic reporting and planning. getting your data centralized, doing your financial close quickly, maybe even building out some multidimensional data analyses. As you progress, you move into things like automation, enterprise reporting, self-service analytics. Most of these are pretty common terms now. We do see these in many organizations. Getting more sophisticated as we progress, we have analytics start to span more departments, including finance and operations, including sales, including HR, maybe even including other departments within the organization. We see topics like driver-based modeling, leading and external indicators, scenario analysis, and rolling forecasts. We continue along the maturity curve here, and we start to get into advanced data analytics with things like predictive analytics and unstructured data. As the organization starts to truly adopt analytics across the entire enterprise, analytics will become aligned with corporate strategy. And as we continue to progress, it leads to an enterprise-wide transformation, that culture of analytics that we talked about. Now, when I present this slide, I always get the same questions. How many organizations out there are truly achieving all of these wonderful things on the right-hand side of the slide? Okay, so the answer is not many. Everyone's striving to achieve that, but the stuff on the right-hand side, that analytics culture, it takes a while. Most organizations find themselves mostly on the left-hand side, maybe a few projects dabbling in areas found in the middle of the curve. There are organizations out there who are well along in their journey, and it gives you something to strive towards. The next most common question I get is, hey, like, all this is great. Thanks for pointing it all out, but how do we get there? How do we even do it? And so I took this whole slide and I replaced all the labels with sort of tips on how to do it. This is an expansion of some of the same guidelines we've already looked at, so none of this should really be new to us at this point. We start by laying the foundation, right? Cleaning up our data, standardizing processes, finding tools that can help. We go for that early quick win, demonstrating value and building momentum, expand into other areas of the business, enhance our analytics with more advanced tools and practices. Eventually, we get to the point where we're pretty confident in analytics. We're doing it ourselves internally. We've got a team. We've got best practices. We've got a common set of tools that everyone's comfortable with. We can confidently talk about and share our success while continuing to encourage data-driven analysis throughout the organization. But I know, of course, it all sounds so easy when I present it on a slide like this one, and I talk about things like there's no obstacles. Truth is, success is not guaranteed. And so I wanted to look at some real-world success factors for you to consider. But first, let me start by seeing why most projects fail.
Brian, before you continue, we do have a question.
Sure.
It's just on your recent slide. So could you please elaborate on what unstructured data analytics is? Because you mentioned structured and unstructured.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you an example of unstructured data analytics without naming a customer. They are a retailer, and they wanted to do analysis on their sales of their product within a supermarket. So a supermarket has, at least here in Canada, our supermarkets all have shelves, right? And sales will differ depending on where a product is placed on the shelf. So if it's in the middle at eye level, it's more likely to attract attention and more likely to get sales. They used unstructured data. So they took photos, like digital photos, of all of the shelves of all of their products. So in all the different stores where the product was located on the shelf and next to which products in which aisle. And they actually used digital photos, and then they used analytics to do product identification. It had metadata associated with it to identify like what shelf the product was on. And they used those photos and did analytics on that in order to determine like the best product placement for their product. So that's an example of using analytics and unstructured data, in this case, photos. We have other examples of using analytics to do sentiment analysis. So there's a lot of social media out there. There may be a lot of tweets or Facebook posts about your product or about your company. There are analytics tools that will crawl all of those sites to gather all that information about, anytime your company's tagged or your product is named, to grab all that text and then analyze it using machine learning, using sentiment analysis. And so it's reading all the text and processing the language and determining if it's a positive or negative sentiment, and then producing all that the summary of all that data into a report. So that's another example of using unstructured sort of social media data to do sentiment analysis on your product or your company. So that's just a few examples.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I was saying, success is not guaranteed. Let's look at some success factors, but also why most project fails. So what do you guys think the most likely cause for an analytics project to fail is? Well, I'll tell you. We talked about earlier about all manner of obstacles that get in your way. But once you've actually started a project, what might cause it to fail? So in my experience, the biggest reason for an analytics project to fail is low user adoption. What causes low user adoption? It could be any number of things: losing sight of the business goal, scope creep causing a project to take too long or become unwieldy, not setting appropriate expectations with your users or stakeholders, not selecting the right tool for the job, not providing sufficient training. Just remember, your end users are your customers. So whatever you choose to do, your project should empower and delight them. So how do we handle something like low user adoption? Here's a few tips that we've discovered over the years working with clients here at Newcomp. I'm sure you've all heard of the term change management before. This is all about helping members of your team manage the change that comes with new tools, new processes, new ideas. This help often takes the form of training, which itself can take the form of instructor-led or self-paced or in-person or virtual training. Internalizing skills helps, particularly identifying champions among the group who can help others. Sometimes we call the champions evangelists. They're out there promoting our success, promoting analytics internally. Also, when end users are involved in the process early, they gain a sense of ownership and pride for an analytics initiative. We like to choose trusted users to participate in the process from start to finish. They might become our power users or our internal champions or our advocates for the project among their peers. It also helps us maintain a true end user perspective as part of the project team, ensuring that we keep our eye on the business goal. Sometimes we may need to employ different tactics to help with user adoption, things like holding users accountable for what they're actually, to make sure they're actually using what they asked for, and potentially auditing the usage to ensure that happens. A couple of other factors to consider when we're talking about success factors. First, the proverbial elephant in the room. Analytics is hard. It is hard. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it already, and it actually wouldn't be a big deal, and I wouldn't be here giving you this presentation. Analytics is hard, and it only gets harder as you move along that maturity curve. With that in mind, if you're not sure if your organization is qualified to even start a project, or maybe doesn't have the capacity, there is help out there. There's firms like Newcomp Analytics around the world that specialize in data and analytics projects. So don't be afraid to ask for help. The next one's a big one: expectation setting with the executive stakeholders. So many times I've seen C-suite executives asking for something because they read an article about it online, or they saw it at a conference, or their buddies were talking about an analytics initiative that they have within their own organization. There's a lot of wonderful success stories out there, but replicating that success may not be realistic for your organization. So setting realistic expectations is really important to ensuring success out of the gate. Last factor to consider here, and this one's sort of always unexpected: doing a data analytics project often reveals gaps or problems with your existing data, with your existing processes, or even people. So be prepared to find things that may have been wrong all along or broken the whole time. But that's actually a good thing, right? We're better to find them now than have them linger there forever. And after all, the whole point of this is for continuous improvement, doing things better, farther, faster, smarter. That's what analytics is all about. So with that, I want to leave you guys with a call to action. Think about how you can apply everything you've learned today within your own teams, departments, and organizations. We'll share this presentation with you. I encourage you to share with your peers. When you're ready, reach out to us here at Newcomp Analytics or your local analytics firm for help. We can help you build a data and analytics roadmap for your organization and help you get started on your journey. So with that, thank you very much. Alex, are there any other questions?
No, I think we're all good. If anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to ask them. Thanks again, Brian. That was awesome. And thank you everyone for having us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Take care.
We'll sign off. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for attending.